So my name is Dave Ewer, and this is my son. And what's your name?
Okay.
Chris. Yeah, my son Christopher. And Chris is, how old are you, Chris?
15.
15. Yeah. Actually, just turned 16 the other day, so it'll take us a couple of days to get that right. Chris, what kind of activities do you like? What do you play?
Oh,
What kind of ball?
basketball.
Basketball, yeah. And what else?
Baseball.
What other kinds of games do you play? The
Soccer.
ball. Yeah, soccer, that's right. So I describe autism as a neurological disorder that is, and it's a spectrum disorder, so that there's an enormous spectrum of symptoms that you'd see with kids with autism. The higher end of the spectrum, you'd see the higher functioning kids. So these might be kids that are just maybe have got some social quirks or maybe some communication quirks. And then the lower end of the spectrum, and these are kids that have got really diminished characteristics and things like motor skills and academic intellectual skills and communication skills. So neurological disorder, no cure known. It impacts about 1 in 80 or 1 in 100 people. Most of the time when you see somebody with autism, one of the first things you'll notice is maybe some communication deficiencies or some tics, some things that they do to calm themselves down. I think one myth that I think we hear a lot about that is not true, or is not true for very many people, that is worth mentioning, is that most people with autism don't have secret skills. They can't count cards or predict the future. Chris was 2 years old when his mom first diagnosed him. She was convinced that when he was 2, he was doing some things that through her Google medical research, she had determined that he had autism. But it wasn't until he was 3 years old that we had the formal diagnosis. And it was pretty, frankly, pretty devastating. We felt that we were new parents ourselves, so we really didn't know what we were doing with a typical kid. And to get that diagnosis, it was absolutely devastating. And you move from one worry to another. At first, you're worried, what do I have to do tomorrow? Where do I go? Who do I get to help me? Where do I go to get questions answered? And then you move the next day, you feel like you could take on the world, no problem. We can figure this out. We can do anything. And then maybe the next day you're okay with what's going to happen for the next week. You've got a plan, but you don't know what is going to happen in the future. The future is, I think, most parents of autistic kids would say their biggest concern is the future. How will life be without his parents there? So that's probably our biggest concern now. I'd say school is a bit of a love-hate relationship with Christopher. It's about 99% love and about 1% hate. School for Chris is it's pretty tough. We have with the assistance of the teachers and some consultants and his ABA support worker. A day for Chris is arrive and work through programs, work through ABA programs, programs that are very tedious at times, all designed to help him advance very specific skills. The 1% that maybe he doesn't like is that, like any 15 or 16-year-old kid, he gets frustrated if he doesn't understand something or he's working through something difficult. That can be really frustrating, and for somebody who doesn't have really good communication skills and can't talk about that frustration. Sometimes he has no other outlet to lash out or have a meltdown, and so that's not ideal in school. But we're fortunate that's probably only 1% or 5% of his day, but generally there's nothing he likes more than being in school. But he loves that. He loves the structure. He loves being around other kids and the chaos and the hubbub of walking through a hallway and all that noise and activity that goes on and all those social things. Even though he's not strong on the social side, he gets it. He really loves it. I think the things as far as his peers go that help him out, it's the simple things like saying hi Chris, how are you doing, what did you do on the weekend, just the simple communication. That's all he really needs from kids. And if you're a kid and you don't know him that well and you come up to him and say hi Chris, he's going to remember that forever. That's a big deal. And when we pass that same student on the street and that student says hi, a block later, Chris will he'll say, if we ask him who that was, he'll tell us who that was, and that was Jeff, and that's pretty terrific. I think the biggest thing that we always ask of our teachers and administrators and principals, or the thing that they can do that would help us the most, or help all families with autism the most, is just doing your best to accommodate. I know that having an autistic student in your class can be disruptive. It's not easy, but teachers need to know that the school is the center of the universe for a lot of these kids. That is where all the advancement happens. For Christopher, that's where all his social activity is. It's where all his academic activity is. His physical education, so his motor skill advancement. It's all there. So unlike a lot of kids where school is really centered on academics, for a student with autism, it's so much more than that. Chris's biggest challenge, and it's not apparent now. He's pretty relaxed, but Chris's biggest challenge is anxiety. So when he's frustrated and he can't communicate with somebody, he can lash out and have a meltdown, and sometimes they can be pretty devastating. They can last for 15 or 20 minutes, and then it takes another half an hour to kind of get him sorted out, and it's disruptive for everybody. It takes an hour out of his day. There's other kids around that are trying to do work, and it's disruptive for them as well. So he's been doing a lot of work with considerable success, I think, Chris, to try to come up with tactics, with strategies to calm himself down when he feels like he's getting anxious, and so little things like he does a lot with the hands, but little things like deep breaths and keeping his hands nice and tight. Sometimes he just likes to sit on the floor in the corner and just do a little bit of Chris meditation. But so he's done a lot of work on that, and I think with some success. He's a big, strong kid. He's an athletic kid. He likes our ball skills aren't quite there yet, but he really likes soccer and basketball. He also plays a little bit of baseball. Does a little bit of swimming. Plays a little bit of piano, and I think he's pretty good at all those things. He's usually willing to try most things once anyway, and I think he's a pretty good athlete. I'm pretty sure that under just different circumstances, he'd be a pretty good hockey player too. Plans for the future, it's pretty difficult to plan too much for the future. We'll go day by day and week by week and month by month, and for now we're really focused on trying to advance his communication and social skills and his academic skills, and we'll have to just see. He's pretty hard to predict right now. He's been changing a lot over the last 2 or 3 years, like any teenager, but he's been changing even more than that. So we'll just have to see. We'll just have to go with the flow. Awesome about autism, I have to say I can't think of anything that's particularly awesome about autism. I can think I met some kids who have autism that are awesome kids, and I think Chris is no exception to that. He's an awesome kid, but I don't think I could ever say that autism has made him awesome. He's got a lot of awesome characteristics, but autism, in my mind, is really an impairment to all those characteristics. It makes him harder. Makes it harder for those characteristics to shine through. So he's an awesome kid, but it's not because of autism.